What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about your body, your bones, your blood, your brain, wasn't just flawed, it was designed to fail? Across the infinite black sea of stars, where civilizations span solar systems and empires rise and fall like waves, there is one universal truth shared among the advanced species. Humans are broken. Not just wounded, not just primitive, fundamentally, genetically corrupted. To the Virelian scholars of the 13th spiral, we're a biological joke, a sack of flesh patched together with mismatched code. The Mach theory, who've lived over 90,000 galactic cycles, refer to us as the children of entropy. And among the galactic councils, where evolutionary perfection is currency, humanity is whispered about as a mystery and a mistake. But why? Why would evolution, so precise, so unforgiving, craft something so flawed? Why would the universe allow a creature that suffocates without oxygen, collapses under gravity shifts, and requires near-constant nutrient intake to survive, let alone thrive? That's where the story begins. Not in a lab, not in a temple, but aboard a derelict vessel found orbiting a dying neutron star. Inside, a message encoded in spectral harmonics, meant not for machines, but for the conscious mind, played a single phrase. They broke you because they feared what you were becoming. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to StarBoundApex HFY for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. Now, brace yourself, because this story doesn't end with Earth. It starts long before it. Roughly 128,000 Earth years ago, in a system known only to the ancient starfarers as Neru's Gate, the beings we now call the architects made their final stand. Towering intelligences who forged life across the spiral arms, they manipulated DNA the way an artist manipulates color. They were not gods, just old, wise, and very, very scared. They had discovered something horrifying in the depths of one of their failed projects, a race whose biology resisted control, whose minds adapted faster than psychic inhibitors could cage them, who thrived in pain, in stress, in war. They named it Project Zeta Orionis, a test species built with adaptive genetics, rapid regenerative systems, and most terrifying of all, emergent consciousness capable of rewriting its own instincts. Humans. We were never meant to be as we are. Our clumsy joints, our fragile skin, our inefficient eyes, all signs of a sabotaged blueprint. The architects didn't fail when they made us. They crippled us, intentionally. Embedded in our genome are sequences of code, genetic chains that serve no purpose. At least, not for survival. But the architects weren't just engineers. They were jailers. These junk strands, they're lock mechanisms, prison keys. You see, beneath all the chaos, there's something dormant inside us, something that terrifies even the eldest species of the stars. The Kirith Dominion, who first studied us during the Pale Contact Wars, reported that humans under extreme emotional distress show neurological shifts beyond what should be possible. Memories unlock, muscles harden, reflexes sharpen. Some even achieve feats that mock physics itself, surviving conditions that would atomize even reinforced synthetics. They called it echo instinct, a flare of some ancient protocol, something hidden inside our corrupted flesh. One researcher's final log, recovered from a shattered station near Saturn's ring, read, "They're not evolving. They're remembering." The deeper the aliens looked, the more afraid they became. Our immune system, so chaotic it sometimes attacks itself, is hyper-reactive, able to recognize thousands more threat signatures than any known species. Our brains, riddled with chemical imbalances and electrical storms, are impossibly flexible. Other species need artificial implants to adapt. Humans, just give us enough trauma and time. We adapt ourselves. But if we're so adaptable, why are we dying from cancer, plagued by degenerative diseases, hunted by our own biology. Because of the failsafe. The final lock. The genome burn protocol. Installed in every line of our DNA by the architects, the moment they realized the truth, that humanity wasn't just another species. We were a recursive intelligence, the life form that would eventually awaken not just to the stars, but to its own godhood. And so, they buried us. They sabotaged the body. They corrupted our DNA. They erased our early histories. They scattered what remained of our progenitor knowledge across ruined moons and erased timelines. But they couldn't stop the signal. The moment one human touches the deep echo, the resonance starts. Others feel it. Others change. And across the galaxy, that resonance has started again. A single human, a pilot named Aaron Cross, survived a mind warp event that should have turned his brain into quantum sludge. Instead, he spoke a language not known since the first flame. Words that bent machines. Words that woke things buried in black holes. The architects are long dead. But they're fail-safe. It's starting to fail. And humanity is beginning to remember what it was and what it was meant to become. What the hell is wrong with human biology? Everything. Because it was never supposed to be human to begin with. Across the fractal dimensions of galactic time, there are constants, forces so woven into the fabric of existence that even the most ancient minds fear disturbing them. Life, death, memory, and human biology. Not biology as Earth's textbooks describe it, but something older, deeper, something buried beneath layers of engineered dysfunction, an ancient architecture warped into a prison of flesh. Let's go back. Not to Earth, but to the Solaran expanse, a region of dead space surrounded by war-ruined systems. Here, the Kelari archivists recovered what remains of a silent probe drifting for over 200,000 years. It wasn't transmitting coordinates or warnings. It was broadcasting a biological cipher, a living genetic code that pulsed through radiation like a beacon. That code, a partial reconstruction of the original human genome, uncorrupted, pure, before the failsafe, before the fear. And what they discovered terrified them. In the unmodified genome, humans weren't weak or clumsy. They were biomorphic adaptive entities, a life form capable of spontaneously modifying internal structures in response to hostile environments. A human placed in zero gravity for long enough would grow a second neural spine. One exposed to cosmic radiation could develop reflective organelles beneath their skin. We weren't supposed to adapt slowly. We were meant to rewrite ourselves instantly. But those functions have been cut off. You see, embedded in our mitochondrial DNA are inhibitor chains, strands of ancient biotech code that limit protein synthesis under stress. These chains don't evolve naturally. They are signatures of intentional sabotage. Imagine giving a creature wings, then binding them with invisible cords. That's what the architects did. They locked us in a shell of pain, forcing evolution to crawl instead of soar. But the lock is leaking. Let me introduce you to the Selekran incident, documented in secret by the Xal Ruin observers. During a covert study of human response to planetary collapse, a single Earth-born colonist named Ivana Deller survived 12.3 days on a world with no breathable atmosphere, volcanic eruptions, and seismic spikes exceeding 8.5 on the local scale. Her vitals, stable. Her skin, hardened into a translucent dermal mesh. Her eyes, capable of refracting the ambient heat waves to see in a 270-degree radius. She wasn't mutated. She had unlocked a fragment. And this wasn't isolated. From deep within forbidden space, reports trickle in, classified under aberrant awakening protocols. Human soldiers surviving plasma burns that should have liquefied organs. Pilots with reaction speeds beyond any neural limit. Civilians resisting psychic subjugation from mindlords who've enslaved entire species. All showing signs of a partial echo, a momentary ignition of pre-failsafe functions buried in our genes. What activates these echoes? Not training, not enhancement, pain, loss, trauma. The body remembers what it once was when the mind is torn wide open. That's why the failsafe is designed to fail over time. The architects knew they couldn't keep us locked forever. So they crafted biology that wears itself down. Systems that collapse, burn out, decay, arthritis, cancer, autoimmune failure, all deliberate byproducts of decaying suppression. The body is breaking, but not from weakness, from resistance. And deep in the ancient vaults of the Miracle Fortress worlds, a forbidden text, translated at the cost of 3 interstellar wars, speaks of a species not born, but recovered. One line burned into every reader's mind. The curse is not your weakness. It is your chain, and the chain is breaking. Still think your back pain is just from bad posture. The truth is worse. Your spine was designed to snap under Earth's gravity, because your original form was meant to walk in variable fields across worlds light years apart. Your lungs collapse in low oxygen environments because you weren't supposed to breathe air. Your skin once filtered cosmic particles for sustenance. Your brain forgets trauma because remembering might wake up something sleeping beneath the conscious mind. Even sleep itself isn't what it seems. Advanced civilizations have studied human sleep patterns for millennia. No species dreams the way humans do: random, chaotic, emotional, and terrifying. Most believe dreams are echoes of buried evolutionary memories. But what if they're not memories? What if they're instructions? Encoded messages buried in the broken system, fragments of ancestral algorithms trying to reboot a corrupted interface. That's what the Lurithi cryptolinguists believe. They mapped hundreds of human dream transcripts and found a pattern. Not language, not imagery. Coordinates. 12 galactic locations that correspond to ancient void structures. No human has ever been there. Yet somehow, we dream about them. Why? Because those places may be more than ruins. They might be activation nodes, gateways, triggers, and humanity, with all its flaws and fragility, might be unknowingly walking toward its reawakening. Step by step, wound by wound, dream by dream. The question isn't what's wrong with us. The question is what happens when all that's wrong becomes right again. When the locks fall, when the failsafe dies, and we become what we were always meant to be. There's something else you should know, something that might make your skin crawl when you realize how close we've been to it. Humanity wasn't the only one engineered. We were built to answer a cosmic call. But there were others, other beings, scattered across the galaxy, also shaped by unseen hands for purposes we can't even begin to understand. These races, some of the first biological experiments in the vastness of the universe, weren't just designed to exist. They were designed to interact, to test, to challenge, to evolve against each other in an endless cycle of trial and error. Each race with its own purpose, and each with its own genetic faults, its own sets of limitations, and, ultimately, its own failsafes. But that's where humanity stands apart. The other races were always engineered with their strengths and weaknesses designed to keep them contained, manageable. Some were stronger, faster, more resilient. Others more adaptable, but easily corrupted by the very tools they were given. But humans, we were meant to be different. You see, the first of our kind, the true ancient humans, were not just biological entities. They were vessels. Not vessels of flesh, but of ideas. In a galaxy dominated by older, more ancient species, humanity was designed as a species of unpredictability, a wild card in a universe that had long been tamed by ancient laws and ancient minds. The engineers, those nameless entities who shaped the galaxy and its biological denizens, wanted something new, something unpredictable. They realized that if they could manipulate biology, they could breed a species capable of growth beyond their design, pushing evolution in ways no other species had done before. At the heart of this design was an ancient concept, one too strange to comprehend unless you could see the signs: The Prometheus cycle. The Prometheus cycle is the genetic blueprint embedded deep in the DNA of every human being. It's not just a natural cycle of growth. It's a blueprint for expansion. A map that, if triggered at the right time, would open the human mind and biology to forces far beyond our comprehension. Forces from other dimensions. Forces that could make humans something else entirely. Something more. But to trigger this, there needed to be a specific condition, a cataclysmic event, a threshold, a collapse. This is where it gets interesting, where it gets terrifying. The Prometheus cycle's fail-safe system was not like the simple lock mechanisms in human biology that kept us from activating these dormant abilities. No, this cycle required a catalyst, some grand world-shattering event, some moment that could unhinge reality itself and send ripples through human biology in ways no one predicted. That event, it was the Great Reckoning, the very collapse of human civilization. You've heard of the collapse of Earth, the fall of humanity. But the truth is, it wasn't just the collapse of civilization. It was the collapse of the failsafe. The engineers had programmed a last-ditch effort to prevent humanity from surpassing its boundaries. They built civilizations to rise and fall, believing that the collapse would re-anchor humanity's genetic trajectory. But they underestimated us. What they didn't foresee was the inner strength of the human mind, the drive to survive, adapt, overcome, even in the face of unimaginable loss. It's said that during the darkest days, when humanity faced extinction from alien invaders, when technology and society crumbled like sandcastles under the tide, humans began to change. The Prometheus cycle had been dormant for millennia, but the cataclysm cracked its sealed vaults, unleashing a surge of potential deep within the human genome. It wasn't sudden. No, it wasn't a big bang of power or some great burst of transformation. It started slow, quietly. The first signs were subtle. Mental resilience. It was noticed in pockets of humanity. Soldiers, survivors of wars, those who lived through the harshest conditions on Earth, showing a new level of mental clarity. Sudden bursts of intuition, strategy, and insight that went far beyond any logical training they had undergone. Then came the biological adaptations, the hidden, near imperceptible mutations that began appearing, not just in the survivors of war or starvation, but in children. Children who were born with hyperintelligence, people with immunity to diseases that had once ravaged Earth, survivors in deep space colonies who could withstand radiation levels that would have been fatal to their ancestors. It was subtle, like a whispering edge of a blade moving against the grain of reality. And the more humanity faced, the stronger it became. Every collapse, every failure, every loss acted as a fuel. Like a wick catching fire, the failures began to ignite dormant genes that were meant to be sealed for eternity. But when the darkness hit, when humanity's greatest test arrived, the fail-safe finally cracked. What was once a fractured humanity, surviving by scraps and fate, became an unstoppable force. The ancient fail-safe couldn't hold anymore. The long-locked gates of human biology had burst open, and what emerged was a species not defined by its weaknesses, but by its infinite potential. As humanity's transformation continued, so too did the startling discoveries about how deeply ingrained this hidden potential was. There were reports from ancient, shadowy observatories, the kind found in the deepest recesses of space, that certain human colonies were beginning to exhibit nonlinear thinking, able to navigate through impossible scenarios. Mind patterns, waveforms, linked through quantum entanglement, began forming on their own. They called it the human nexus, a ripple, at first, but growing, expanding, a field of collective thought, consciousness, and biological manipulation that was shaping humanity into a force greater than any of the engineers had anticipated. And still, they remain unaware. Most humans don't realize that their biological blueprint has unlocked a pathway into the deepest secrets of the cosmos, something that can only be seen by those with the eyes to perceive it. It's all starting to make sense now, isn't it? The mysteries of human biology. They were never random, never accidents. The Prometheus cycle was always waiting for a moment of collapse, waiting for the right kind of human spirit to rise up, to push beyond the limitations. And when it does, when the Nexus truly awakens, the entire galaxy will feel the tremors. Now, you know why humanity can't be contained. Are we ready? Humanity, now on the brink of uncovering its true potential, finds itself standing at a precipice that, if stepped off, would send ripples through the cosmos, the likes of which no one has ever witnessed. The universe has always had its rules, laws of physics, laws of biology, even laws of emotion and intellect. But humanity, in its most primal and unpredictable form, was never meant to fit within the confines of these laws. You see, we were designed with an imperfection that makes us the greatest unknown variable in the galaxy. But it's not just our biology that makes us unique. It's what our biology can do when it's no longer restricted. And there's something far darker at play. Something that was buried deep within the early codes of our creation, waiting for a moment when humanity's very existence would teeter on the edge of destruction. That's when the universe would truly witness what humanity is capable of. Let me explain. The Nexus, the strange collective consciousness of humanity, is not just some theoretical concept or myth. It is real. A metaphysical web of thought, connected to every human mind, past, present, and future. This network is powered by the biological superstructure hidden deep within our DNA. And once humanity reaches a certain threshold, when the genetic anomalies of our biology have undergone enough stress and strain, the Nexus activates. At first, it manifests as shared dreams, inexplicable thoughts, and sudden flashes of insight that no one can explain. Some humans, especially those who are linked to the Nexus, begin to experience a heightened awareness of otherworldly forces that no human should comprehend. There are reports of strange phenomena, impossible objects appearing in the sky, light that bends in ways that defy known laws of physics, and even voices heard in the void, whispers from beyond the fabric of reality. The Nexus isn't just some mental network that connects minds. It's a cosmic catalyst, unlocking powers that are beyond the understanding of any single species in the galaxy. As the Nexus grows stronger, human evolution begins to take a radical turn. It becomes apparent that the Prometheus cycle is pushing humanity towards something unimaginably powerful. But these changes are not just physical or mental. They begin to alter humanity's interaction with space itself. Let me take you into the heart of what's happening. The dimensional rift, a phenomenon thought to be a theoretical concept, begins to manifest around certain human colonies. What the universe doesn't realize is that these rifts are directly linked to the Nexus. Human minds have now evolved to the point where they can manipulate not just matter, but the very fabric of space-time. The human mind, when tuned to the right frequency through the Nexus, begins to tear at the edges of reality. This is where things start getting truly terrifying. You see, humanity's ability to manipulate space-time doesn't just allow them to fold space, creating faster-than-light travel. It allows them to bend the laws of the universe itself, to break the rules that govern existence. The most mind-bending discovery came when a select group of humans, call them the Nexus Pioneers, uncovered the ability to perceive alternate dimensions. These dimensions were not just separate realities, but entirely different timelines, branches of time that were simultaneously existing alongside our own. They began to experiment with these alternate dimensions, just as the first human warships were built with the Nexus at their core. These warships weren't just vessels. They were living ships, created using the very same biological anomalies embedded deep within humanity's genetic code. These ships were mind-linked to their captains, powered by the will and consciousness of their commanders, feeding off the very thoughts of those who control them. The engineers who had designed humanity never could have foreseen this. They designed the human race to evolve. Yes, but they never realized how fast it would evolve once the shackles were off. Now, the Nexus pioneers had unlocked a terrifying ability, the power to leap through time. But that's not all. The first warships, infused with human consciousness, gained the ability to harness the power of gravity wells, using them to manipulate the fabric of space itself, turning black holes into weapons. With these warships, humanity was able to weaponize time distortions, creating time loops that disrupted entire fleets of alien invaders, trapping them in infinite, repeating timelines. These invaders, who once thought themselves invincible, were now helpless in the face of humanity's strange new powers. The Nexus had transformed human biology into something unfathomably dangerous, not just a species capable of traveling through space, but one that could rewrite reality itself. At the heart of these battles, these human warships, once mere ideas, are now sentient, living beings, part human, part machine, and part quantum enigma. They operate outside the laws of physics, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And the best part, they are self-aware. In the midst of an intergalactic war, a singular human warship, known as the Eclipse, became the most feared vessel in the galaxy. With its ability to slip between dimensions and skip through time, it was virtually untouchable. The Eclipse's weapons were powered by the distortions in spacetime that it could generate. It could appear at a moment's notice, strike with unthinkable force, and vanish without a trace. What the universe failed to understand was that the Eclipse wasn't just a weapon. It was humanity's message. We are here, and we will not be silenced. Now, the universe trembles under the weight of humanity's new powers. Once seen as weak, fragile, and vulnerable, humanity has become an unstoppable force, its warships and Nexus-enhanced warriors wreaking havoc across the stars. But with this newfound power comes a dangerous cost. The time fractures caused by humanity's warships have begun to unravel the very fabric of reality. Strange anomalies are appearing throughout the galaxy. Cities on distant planets are slowly being swallowed by dimensional rifts, while entire star systems flicker in and out of existence. The Nexus, while a tool of unimaginable power, has also become a virus, its presence spreading across the cosmos like a cancer, altering everything it touches. And now, humanity faces a choice. Do they continue down this path of evolution, pushing the boundaries of what their biology can do? Or will they learn that some powers, once unlocked, can never be controlled? One thing is certain, the galaxy will never be the same. If you thought the universe was vast, mysterious, and dangerous before, you haven't seen anything yet. We are only just beginning. Are we ready to handle this power, or will we become the very threat we once feared? Now that you've seen the full scope of humanity's potential, let me ask you one final question. What would you do with the power to break reality itself if humanity thought they could control the power they had unleashed? They were sorely mistaken. What began as a series of isolated incidents, strange time loops and rips in the fabric of reality, quickly escalated into something far more dangerous, something far more insidious. The universe had no idea what it was about to face. It wasn't just the human warships that were wreaking havoc. It was the biological anomaly embedded within humanity itself. The Nexus had become far more than a collective consciousness. It was now an unstoppable force, warping reality with every passing second. And that's when the first major incident occurred. Out in the Epsilon Eridani system, humanity had established a military outpost on a planet rich with resources. It was meant to be a secure base, safe from the increasing alien incursions happening across the galaxy. But as with all things in this new era, it was anything but safe. A routine transport ship was making its way back to the station when something strange happened. The ship vanished without a trace. No distress signal, no signs of struggle. The ship was simply gone. At first, it was believed to be a freak accident, a malfunction in the ship's systems, perhaps. But when the search teams arrived, they didn't find a wreck. They found something else. The landscape around the outpost had begun to warp, as if reality itself had become distorted. The atmosphere shifted, the planet's gravitational field started fluctuating, and the very laws of physics seemed to twist and bend in ways they weren't meant to. But it wasn't just the landscape that had changed. The people on the outpost, a few hundred personnel, had vanished completely, as if they were erased from existence. No bodies, no remains, just an empty outpost on a planet that had once been lush and habitable, now reduced to a barren wasteland where even the sky felt off-kilter. As the Nexus pioneers began to investigate, it became apparent that the strange time and space distortions weren't localized. They were expanding, spreading like a contagion. The Eclipse, humanity's most powerful warship, was sent to investigate. The crew of the Eclipse was unlike any other. They were not just soldiers. They were mind-linked with their ship. The ship itself was more of a living organism than a vessel. The Nexus resonated with the crew's minds, amplifying their thoughts, emotions, and instincts, turning them into something more than human. The Eclipse's captain, Commander Juno Valoris, had once been a regular officer, but after her own biological enhancements through the Nexus, she had become something else. She was more than just a leader. She was a part of the warship. The ship's its sentience, was intertwined with her mind, making them a unified being, like two halves of a single whole. Commander Valoris and her crew arrived at the site, their sensors picking up strange temporal signatures and distortions that seemed to emanate from the planet's core. It was almost as if something had been buried deep beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. They set up a field base and began scanning for anomalies, but what they discovered was far more terrifying than they could have ever anticipated. The distortions weren't just random, they were intelligent. The fabric of reality was being manipulated by a presence far older and far more powerful than anything humanity had ever faced. A force that had been lying dormant for millions of years. And it was awake. The Nexus, as powerful as it was, had inadvertently stirred something ancient, something that had been waiting. This force, an entity from a time long before humanity had even evolved, was a primordial being of unimaginable power, existing beyond the constraints of time, space, and matter. Its name, if it even had one, was unknown, but it was clear it was not something any human, or any species, could hope to defeat. Commander Valoris could feel it, this presence. In the depths of her mind, she began to hear whispers, fragments of thoughts from a being that had existed long before her species was born. It spoke of infinite power and the end of time itself. This being was not bound by the same rules that governed the rest of the universe. It had been trapped in the fabric of existence, locked away by forces even older than the stars themselves. But the Nexus, the very biological anomaly that had unlocked humanity's potential, had disturbed its prison, and now it was free. As Valoris and her team attempted to understand what they were facing, the first signs of the creature's power became apparent. They tried to use their warship's dimensional leap technology to escape the planet's surface, but the time rift surrounding them grew stronger, pulling them deeper into the chaos. The Eclipse itself started to shift. Its technology, once flawless, became unstable, warping the very fabric of space-time around them. The once unbeatable ship began to fail. One of the crew members, Lieutenant Maris, a newly enhanced human linked to the Nexus, began to experience something even more disturbing. Her mind, connected to the Nexus, began to receive transmissions, not from her fellow humans, but from the entity itself. It was reaching into her consciousness, trying to corrupt her thoughts. The Nexus, for all its power, was not a perfect system. The parasitic entity was using the very same connection that humanity had relied on to unlock their latent potential. It was turning their strength into a weakness. The tension mounted as time fractures grew more pronounced. The outpost's personnel, presumed lost, began to reappear, change. Their bodies were not quite human anymore. They were twisted reflections, beings caught between time, their minds fractured by the presence that had seized control of them. And they were now part of the entity. With their warship in disarray and their crew becoming more and more mentally unstable, Commander Valoris faced the most difficult decision of her life. Should she attempt to fight the being using the ship's technology, knowing the risk of further destruction, or should she abandon the mission to save what was left of her crew? As Valoris weighed her options, the entity spoke again, this time through her. You are but a flicker, a moment in time. You cannot escape the inevitable. The warship, once humanity's triumph, was now the prison for those who dared challenge the ancient force. But Valoris wasn't ready to give up. She refused to let this creature consume them. The Eclipse was not just a ship, it was the key. If they could somehow harness its quantum core, perhaps they could seal the rift. The crew scrambled, piecing together a desperate plan to harness the Nexus in a way no one had ever dreamed. But it was clear, humanity had unlocked something too powerful, and now they had to face the consequences. Will Commander Valoris and her crew survive this encounter, or will humanity's own creation be its undoing? This was only the beginning, and the galaxy, once more, had underestimated humanity's resilience. Are we ready to face the consequences of our ambition? The next chapter holds the answers. The Eclipse, humanity's pride, was now fracturing, both physically and mentally. It was no longer the sleek, indestructible warship it had once been. The Nexus, with its far-reaching tendrils, had begun to distort the very fabric of reality aboard the ship. Time, space, and even thought itself had become malleable. Commander Valoris stood before the main console, her hands trembling as she gripped the control panel. Her crew, once steadfast and loyal, now appeared as mere shadows of their former selves. The Nexus had taken root in their minds, feeding off their fears, desires, and ambitions, turning them into something unrecognizable. The ship had become a living, breathing organism, a monstrous amalgamation of human will and ancient power. The Presence, the ancient entity that had awakened from the dark corners of the galaxy, was relentless. It spoke, its voice reverberating in their minds, weaving through their thoughts like a tangled web of darkness. You cannot escape what you have awakened. The words echoed in Valoris' head, and for a moment she questioned her own mind. Was this truly the entity speaking, or was it a product of the Nexus, her enhanced cognition, playing tricks on her? Was there a difference anymore? Was she still in control of her thoughts? You are a spark in the infinite void. You are nothing. The words cut deep, sinking into her soul. She felt the cold weight of their truth. The Nexus, which had been humanity's greatest achievement, was now turning on them. And if the ancient entity had its way, they would become nothing more than a footnote in the annals of galactic history. They had become an experiment, and the results were horrifying. Valoris had always been a warrior at heart. The Nexus had enhanced her beyond the limits of human capability. But now, she realized the greatest weapon she had, her mind, was being warped, twisted, and tested by a force beyond comprehension. This was no longer just a warship against an enemy. This was a battle of the mind, a struggle to maintain identity against an entity that sought to consume everything. The crew of the Eclipse had been subjected to the same ordeal. As the ship's systems became increasingly unstable, each member of the crew began to lose their sense of self. Lieutenant Maris, once a brilliant tactician, was now a mere vessel for the entity's influence. Her eyes no longer reflected the humanity Valoris had once seen. Now, they were clouded, vacant, possessed by the ancient being. Every attempt to fight back against the time rifts, the dimensional fractures, only seemed to make the situation worse. Reality itself was tearing apart at the seams. The warship's hull bent and twisted as if it were made of paper, and the crew began to see visions, horrifying, nightmarish images that bled into the ship's corridors. You are in my domain now, the entity whispered in their minds. The Nexus is mine to command. But Commander Valoris wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. She knew that humanity had done impossible things before. They had conquered worlds, faced down greater powers, and survived when all hope seemed lost. They had an unfathomable will, the very thing that had allowed them to reach this point in history. She gathered what was left of the crew, those who still clung to their sanity, and devised a final plan. If they could reverse the polarity of the Nexus core, they might be able to close the rift, stabilize the ship, and seal away the ancient presence before it consumed them all. But it wasn't going to be easy. The Nexus core had become sentient, its purpose intertwined with the very life force of the crew. The core was feeding off the collective consciousness of every human aboard, amplifying their emotions, their desires, and their memories. It was a living entity in its own right, a parasitic force with its own will and ambition. Valeris knew that to shut down the Nexus would be to sacrifice everything. The crew's very connection to the ship, their enhanced cognition, would be lost forever. But if they didn't act now, the galaxy would be plunged into an eternal cycle of destruction. The ancient entity would remain free, devouring all in its path. The plan was set into motion, and the final confrontation began. They made their way to the core chamber, the heart of the ship. Inside, the Nexus core pulsed with a strange energy, its tendrils reaching out into the walls of the ship, merging with the systems, and distorting the very air around them. The crew's minds, now attuned to the core, felt the weight of its influence. They could feel the entity's presence pressing in from all sides, whispering, taunting, and threatening them. As they approached the core, the air grew thick with tension. The chamber was a twisting maze of shifting corridors, hallways that seemed to bend and twist, leading them into alternate dimensions, fragments of time they couldn't escape. The crew was torn between the present and the future, memories of their past lives clashing with the visions of a reality that was yet to come. Lieutenant Maris, now more a puppet than a person, lunged at Valeris, her eyes glowing with unnatural energy. The entity had fully taken control of her, using her as a conduit to strike at the heart of humanity's last hope. But Valeris wasn't deterred. She had been trained for this moment, to face the impossible. The clash was fierce, but the power of the Nexus couldn't overpower her will. Valeris was no longer just a captain. She had become the very embodiment of humanity's determination. With a final push, Valeris activated the shutdown sequence. The core began to hum, its energy growing stronger, threatening to implode. The ship shook violently, the Nexus fighting to maintain its grip on the crew. And then, in a flash of light and energy, the rift began to close. The entity's grip loosened, its influence waning, as the dimensional tear that had swallowed the ship began to stabilize. But it wasn't over. The battle for the eclipse was far from won. The rift was closing, but at a cost. Valeris knew that even as the Nexus was sealed, the entity was still out there, waiting. It had tasted the power of humanity, and it would not rest until it had consumed it completely. As the ship stabilized, Valeris took a moment to look out at the stars. She knew they had only just begun their battle with the unknown. The galaxy would never be the same. And humanity, for all its flaws and struggles, had just proven that even in the face of cosmic terror, they would never back down. Will humanity ever truly understand the true nature of the Nexus? Can they stand against the dark forces that hide in the shadows of the cosmos? As Commander Valeris looks out at the endless stars, the mystery deepens. The entity waits. The silence in the aftermath of the battle was deafening. The once mighty warship, the Eclipse, now hung in the vastness of space, broken and scarred. The Nexus had been sealed, its vast tendrils of influence severed, but at a steep cost. Commander Valeris, standing at the helm, could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on her. The ship was still intact, but its future was uncertain. As she gazed out at the empty blackness of space, the stars blinking like distant fires, the enormity of their victory and their loss settled in her chest. Humanity had faced down an ancient entity, a power so vast it could warp the very fabric of space and time, and survived. But at what cost? The ship's crew, once proud and strong, had been irreparably altered. In the aftermath, Lieutenant Maris, who had been possessed by the Nexus, lay unconscious in the medical bay. Her once sharp, calculating mind had been torn asunder, her soul a mere fragment of what it once was. Valeris, standing by her side, wondered if the human spirit had been forever tainted by the entity's touch, or if they could rebuild. Could humanity survive the scars of such an encounter, or would it eventually lose itself to the vast, unforgiving cosmos? "Commander," a voice crackled over the intercom, breaking her thoughts. It was Captain Rahl, the senior officer who had survived the madness of the Nexus's influence. "The Nexus core is stable, but we need to decide what comes next. The damage done to the ship is extensive." Valeris clenched her fists, eyes narrowing. The Eclipse was no longer the invincible warship it once had been. Its systems were barely operational. But there was something more pressing. The ancient entity they had fought was not the only force that lingered in the shadows of the universe. "I understand," Valeris replied coldly. "But our fight is far from over. We're not done yet." She looked out at the stars again, but her eyes weren't filled with hope. The galaxy, with its endless mysteries, was a vast and dangerous place. The entity they had sealed was only one piece of a much larger puzzle, an ancient force that sought to bring about the end of human existence. And even if they had won this battle, the war had only just begun. The Nexus had known them, humanity, better than they knew themselves. It had twisted their thoughts, their desires, their very reality. It had tested them in ways they could never have anticipated, exposing their weaknesses, their fears, their inner darkness. But that wasn't the true horror. The true horror was what had been uncovered. The Nexus was merely the herald of something far greater, something that had been hiding in the deepest corners of the galaxy for eons, a force that had been waiting to awaken, and it had already seen humanity, felt its potential. It knew that the humans were the greatest threat to its ultimate reign. Valeris's hands gripped the edge of the console as she fought to keep her mind focused. The universe was full of questions, mysteries that had long eluded understanding. Yet she was no longer the naive commander she had been when the Eclipse first embarked on its journey. The very fabric of the galaxy itself was alive, and it was changing, evolving, sometimes in ways they couldn't comprehend. "Captain," Valeris said firmly, turning to face Rahl, "send out a distress signal to the nearest fleet. Let them know what we've encountered. Humanity needs to prepare for what's coming. This was only a taste of what the galaxy has in store for us." Rahl's face darkened. "You think we're the only ones who've ever faced something like this?" "No," Valeris replied, a dark shadow crossing her features. "But we are the first to survive." As the transmission went out, a wave of fear rippled through the ship. They had no idea what was truly out there, how far this ancient force had spread, or how many civilizations had already fallen to its influence. The Nexus had seeded something in their minds, a question that could not be answered easily. Was humanity prepared for the reality of the universe? Were they ready to face the vast unknowns that lurked beyond the stars? Or had they simply stirred something that would now come hunting for them? Commander Valeris turned back to the view screen, her face set in grim determination. She wasn't sure what the future held. She didn't know if the Eclipse would survive long enough to leave the galaxy's edge. But she knew one thing. Humanity was no longer just a footnote in the history of the cosmos. They had proven something undeniable. Humanity had survived the worst the galaxy could throw at them, and they would keep fighting. The transmission was ready, the signal sent. But just as the ship began to move forward, the universe had a new twist in store. A signal, a deep, cryptic transmission, began to bleed through the Eclipse's damaged systems. It wasn't from a known fleet. It wasn't from an alien race. It was a message from beyond the known stars, from the very edge of the galaxy. "We are watching, and we are coming." For a moment, the words hung in the air, as chilling as the void itself. Valeris stood still, her face pale, her heart racing. The war was far from over. If anything, it was only beginning. As the eclipse slowly drifted into the dark unknown, she realized one stark truth. The galaxy was no longer a place for explorers. It was a hunting ground, and humanity had just made the first mistake. What came next would decide everything. Final thought. What lies beyond the stars, in the vast emptiness of space? What ancient forces are truly awake, waiting, watching, and coming for us? Humanity's future is now at the mercy of an unknown power. Will they stand strong, or will they crumble under the weight of the darkness creeping toward them? The battle for the galaxy has only just begun. If you want to be part of the most intense cosmic battles, if you want to know what happens next in the fight for humanity's survival, be sure to subscribe to StarBoundApex HFY. The universe awaits, and we're just getting started. Like, share, and subscribe. Your fight has just begun.